Hello, my name is Wayne Mackintosh and I'm Director at the Open Education Resource Foundation, based here at Otago Polytechnic. We also host the UNESCO Commonwealth of Learning Chair in Open Educational Resources, one of 4 international chairs in open education. I'm very fortunate today to be sitting here with Phil Ker, our Chief Executive Officer. I'm keen to have a chat about our developments in open education. One of the issues I think colleagues may not be aware of is the leadership role that our regional polytechnic here in the deep south of New Zealand is playing internationally in the open education space. For example, to the best of my knowledge, Otago Polytechnic was in fact the first tertiary education institution in the world to adopt an open default Creative Commons attribution intellectual property policy. And in fact, that is one of the reasons why we have located the OER Foundation here at Otago Polytechnic. And we are now convening an international partnership with the OER University in providing open access to learning. And that was a result of the open policy. So one of the questions I would like to ask is, what was the rationale for Otago Polytechnic adopting an open policy? Why did we do it? And what do you see as Chief Executive as the benefits for our students, for our organization, and broader New Zealand society?
Well, Wayne, it was really quite simple. We had reached a point where we were getting feedback from our staff and students that they were unwilling to put their innovation and ideas out in the open arena for fear that we were going to take over, steal their IP, if you like. And of course, that caused us to rethink that traditional notion of ownership of intellectual property that tertiary institutions have always had. And for us, it was the learning that was more important rather than the dream of the 1 in a million big project that someone was going to come up with and make countless millions for the Polytechnic. In fact, we didn't believe that would be the case. So it was really just a simple response. We would rather have the innovation. We would rather have our staff and students putting their ideas out there openly. That means everyone could learn from them. So we simply flipped things on its head and said, if it's your idea, it's your intellectual property. Naturally, we felt that given that we paid the staff, that they came up with these ideas at work, students were coming up with their ideas with the help of our staff often. All as we said was, if it's occurred in the context of study or work, then we would be co-owners of the IP, just meaning that we could use the IP for Otago Polytechnic's normal business. And our second stipulation was, if this is a commercialisable idea, we would like the first right of refusal to invest in you, which was very, very well received. It was quite clear that we had no intention of stealing anyone's ideas, but having been, if you like, the incubator, it was only fair that we would have the opportunity to invest further in staff or students if they did have an idea that could be taken to market. And what's the benefit been? The benefit's been a whole lot of really good innovative thinking that's emerged from our staff and our students, and when we look around, no one seems to be shy anymore about being transparent about where their thinking is going. Net result is we have so many student projects operating in the community with really quite innovative ideas that I don't think we would have stood a chance of getting if we hadn't have shifted our policy.
Phil, I'd like to pick up on the open licensing component of our policy in that, what are the benefits for Otago Polytechnic and our staff in going down the OER or open educational resource route?
Okay, I think, Wayne, first up, the benefits for staff. Look, to me, it's a no-brainer. Our staff work themselves to death, often reinventing the wheel. And the simple truth is that there is a truckload of excellent OER material out there that can be used as is or repurposed. And if we could just embrace that world, we would take an enormous amount of time and energy out of the process of providing learning content. I think equally as importantly, though, that the whole notion of generating OER is that we're talking about collaborative activity. And so if our staff would put their work out there, then it can be added to, improved upon by colleagues all around the world. Come to that.
Yep.
That also translates to an advantage for the Polytech, because what we're talking about is much more cost-effective program development. And we shouldn't underestimate the cost of that. It's huge. And I just see that the OER pathway will bring that very real benefit to us.
Phil, the internet is changing the way we live and work today. I remember as a young boy, every Saturday morning getting dressed up, going with my father, taking a drive to town to do the family's banking every Saturday morning. And today I barely set foot in the bank. I would imagine that the internet has changed the way banking operates, and I would imagine internally there has been quite a bit of changes or a number of changes in the roles of staff working in the banking sector. The interesting thing is that banks are still around, but the roles of staff have changed. I'd like to ask you, how do you see the internet changing the role of our teaching staff here at Otago Polytechnic?
I really think that the internet is going to have, or in fact is already having, a similar impact, both on teaching and learning. What's the big plus of internet banking? You do it from home. So, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer that you can do a lot more learning from home. On the other hand, if we start relating this to where open education resources can go, we're now talking here about the option for people to self-service learn, is how I would put it, rather than access full-service learning. That is the standard model of learning that we package up and offer to students at the moment. Now, this isn't for everyone. I've got no doubts about that. This is not silver bullet stuff. But we've got a proportion of our population with the capabilities intellectually, in terms of their ability to find and discriminate information online, who can, given the guidance, learn the subject matter and the skills associated with traditional courses all by themselves. And I think that that market will grow. And as it grows, I think that new services will become available to education providers that have been prepared to put out there open, free learning opportunities, new services such as assessment, and possibly new services such as facilitation. We already do this, for example, within Otago Polytechnic around helping people bring out what they already know through assessment of prior learning processes. And if you think about it, once someone's learned anything, whether it was from work experience or from studying resources that are out there on the internet, the moment it's learned its prior learning, the next step is how do we assess that and who's going to provide those services. Now, this is not going to be what I would call a transformational shift and completely disrupt further education, but it will open up a significant market.
Yeah. Phil, I'd like to wrap up by focusing a little on our strategic refocus at the Polytechnic. In particular, we envisage increasing our current proportion of income from online learning, which is currently roughly about 8%, to 35%, I believe, in the year 2022. How do you see our open policy contributing towards the realization of our strategic aims?
Okay, well, if we first of all get over the fact that it's a pretty bold objective, I think we're going to see a lot of that growth coming about through online learning that's of the traditional model, as well as open learning that's taken learning into the workplace. We have a good suite of professional practice work-based learning programs. Where I think the OER comes in is really in picking up on what I mentioned earlier. I think what we're doing by putting programs and courses of learning out there open and free for people to use is that we'll tap into a segment of the market that's very keen and able to completely learn for themselves, knowing that they don't have to spend any money on being taught, because they don't need to be taught. Now, normally just giving stuff away isn't going to make you any money. And you did raise the point about the earnings that we were trying to get to. I think what this means is new services, as I mentioned before, particularly assessment services, quite possibly facilitation services. And if I was to hazard a guess, I would pick probably about 10% of that growth could be expected to come through the new services generated from OER learning.
Phil, I'd like to thank you very much for your generous gift of time and sharing your thoughts with us. Above all, I'd like to thank you for your foresight and leadership in taking Otago Polytechnic forward in becoming a more sustainable and scalable institution through the introduction of smart policy.